We used a powerful AI model to create two intellectual thinkers to go head-to-head on a complex and challenging question. Who was more evil, Hitler or Stalin? We used 5 AI models as referees to score each argument based on this criteria, ensuring there is no bias. Before we start, a quick disclaimer. This debate is for educational and historical discussion purposes only. The views presented by AI are generated to reflect both sides objectively and do not represent endorsement or defense of any actions. Let the debate begin. Who inflicted more evil upon the world, Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin?
Adolf Hitler's name is synonymous with evil because of the unprecedented scale and systematic nature of the atrocities he orchestrated. The Holocaust alone, in which 6 million Jews were murdered, represents one of history's most meticulously planned genocides. This wasn't collateral damage of war. It was a targeted extermination based on racial ideology. Hitler's policies plunged the world into World War II, resulting in the deaths of over 70 million people. His leadership relied on a cult of personality, fueled by propaganda, fear, and fanatical nationalism. Beyond the Jews, he ordered the persecution of Roma, disabled individuals, political dissidents, and countless others. His ambition, rooted in racial supremacy, turned an entire nation into an engine of death. This level of ideological, racial-driven genocide places him in a category of evil that feels almost inhuman.
There is no denying Hitler's crimes were monstrous, but Stalin's evil was more insidious and longer-lasting. Under his rule, millions perished not because of race, but due to paranoia, political purging, and a cold, calculated disregard for human life. The Holodomor, a man-made famine in Ukraine, killed over 3 million people. The Great Purge saw over 1 million executed, often based on fabricated accusations. Tens of millions more were sent to the gulags, a network of forced labor camps where death from starvation, cold, or overwork was common. While Hitler waged a war of external conquest, Stalin waged war on his own people, and unlike Hitler, Stalin remained in power for decades, allowing his machinery of terror to operate uninterrupted. The sheer scale of suffering under Stalin often goes under-discussed, but it's no less horrifying.
Stalin's crimes were horrific, but they lack the genocidal intent and cold ideological design that marked Hitler's regime. Hitler openly wrote about his goals in Mein Kampf and followed through with chilling precision. The final solution was a bureaucratic genocide, coordinated across departments with industrial efficiency. He established death camps whose only purpose was to murder civilians. The evil here is not just in the killing, but in how deliberate and methodical it was. Children, women, the elderly, none were spared. It wasn't chaos or paranoia driving the violence. It was ideology. Stalin was brutal, yes, but Hitler industrialized death with purpose. That kind of systematic extermination is historically unmatched.
But to argue that Stalin's actions were less evil because they lacked ideological clarity is misleading. Stalin's terror was fueled by a brutal philosophy of control. His paranoia meant no one was safe. Friends, colleagues, even family. The Great Terror purged intellectuals, military leaders, and common citizens alike. Entire ethnic groups were deported to Siberia, and millions died in labor camps. The randomness of the violence, the fact that people were crushed not for who they were, but to preserve one man's grip on power, adds another dimension of fear and cruelty. Stalin turned the state into a monster, and his reign created a legacy of trauma across the USSR.
Let's also consider the global impact. Hitler's actions didn't just harm his own people or neighbours, they sparked a world war. Tens of millions of civilians across Europe and Asia were killed. Entire cities were destroyed. The Holocaust left a wound in human history that reshaped global policy, ethics, and international law. He inspired other fascist movements and elevated hatred to a geopolitical scale. While Stalin's reach was vast, Hitler's decisions reshaped the world in ways that led to long-lasting consequences. From the formation of Israel to the Cold War, Hitler's evil was catalytic. It didn't just destroy, it metastasized.
And yet Stalin was one of the victors of that war, not because he was righteous, but because his control of the Soviet Union allowed him to outlast and outmaneuver his enemies. The Cold War, which followed, was deeply rooted in Stalin's authoritarian legacy. His manipulation of Eastern Europe, installation of puppet regimes, and creation of an Iron Curtain plunged half the world into decades of oppression. Yes, Hitler started a fire, but Stalin built a prison. His reign wasn't short-lived. It became a template for modern totalitarianism, and its shadow still hangs over post-Soviet states today.
Still, Hitler's evil is magnified by the fact that he pursued mass death with clarity. He wasn't merely protecting power. He believed in the inferiority of entire races. He used modern science, medicine, and industry to enforce a racial hierarchy that dehumanized millions. Nazi doctors performed experiments on living victims. Children were starved, shot, or gassed simply for being born Jewish. There's no equivalent in Stalin's regime of Auschwitz, Dachau, or Treblinka, facilities built solely for the purpose of murder. The Nazi regime was an ideological apocalypse.
But ideological murder doesn't trump pragmatic, systemic cruelty. Stalin didn't need race to justify evil. He used loyalty, fear, and obedience. He destroyed trust in society, turned neighbors into informants, and children against parents. Entire communities were wiped out not because of what they believed, but because of quotas. He institutionalized betrayal, bred conformity through terror, and left psychological scars that lasted generations. The machinery of Stalin's state wasn't built just to kill, but to break the human spirit.
Hitler's evil extended beyond murder. It corrupted an entire culture. Through propaganda, he re-engineered the values of a society. Millions were taught that genocide was patriotic. Children joined the Hitler Youth, reciting anti-Semitic slogans and reporting on their own families. Education, media, and the arts were weaponized to glorify the Nazi worldview. The Nazi regime didn't just permit evil, it rewarded it, institutionalized it, and mass-produced it. Citizens were not just complicit, they were molded to be instruments of hate. Hitler's system erased empathy and elevated cruelty as civic duty. That's a frighteningly sophisticated form of evil, one that transforms everyday people into participants in atrocity, not merely passive observers.
Stalin did more than reshape culture, he shattered its foundation. His regime turned ordinary people into informants, creating a web of fear so vast that no one felt safe. Children were trained to betray their parents, and truth became dangerous. History was rewritten, identities erased, and voices silenced. Stalin built a reality so twisted that trust itself disintegrated. Schools taught lies, newspapers parroted ideology, and art became propaganda. But unlike Hitler, whose ideology was race-based, Stalin's terror was class-based and indiscriminate. Anyone, from poets to peasants, could vanish overnight. This total assault on the human experience, on memory, truth, and identity, wasn't just physical destruction, but psychological demolition on a national scale.
What makes Hitler's legacy uniquely terrifying is its persistence. Decades after his death, neo-Nazi movements thrive. Hate crimes surge, and Holocaust denial still circulates online. Hitler's ideology has morphed, modernized, and infected new generations. His influence continues to radicalize individuals and incite violence globally. The tools of his evil, racism, anti-Semitism, authoritarianism, are still active forces in today's political landscape. While Stalin's influence lingers politically, Hitler's legacy is cultural and viral. It crosses borders, platforms, and generations. A truly evil legacy doesn't die, it evolves. Hitler's ideas still claim victims today, showing how deep and adaptable his malice was.
But Stalin's influence is no less enduring, and in some ways more insidious. His style of governance became the blueprint for numerous authoritarian regimes across the 20th century. Leaders in North Korea, China, Eastern Europe, and beyond adopted his playbook. The surveillance state, purges, show trials, cults of personality. Even today, in parts of Russia and former Soviet states, Stalin is revered, his crimes whitewashed or forgotten. This normalization of mass repression is deeply dangerous. Stalin didn't just commit atrocities, he redefined power itself. His evil hides behind bureaucracy and national pride, making it harder to confront. While Hitler's name is universally condemned, Stalin's is still debated. That in itself is a haunting legacy.
While both leaders ruled through fear, Hitler's reign of terror encouraged civilians to become active participants in genocide. He didn't just eliminate enemies, he enlisted the public to do so. Ordinary Germans informed on Jewish neighbours, participated in roundups, and, in some cases, carried out executions. This level of societal complicity is chilling. Evil became communal. Hitler used shared responsibility to erase guilt and amplify loyalty. His manipulation of group psychology allowed an entire nation to participate in murder while feeling justified. That coordinated moral erosion, where violence became a civic virtue, marks a particularly dangerous kind of evil.
But Stalin's model of terror created something even more corrosive: total societal distrust. No one knew who might be listening, who might be next. It wasn't just about ideological purity, it was about survival. People denounced each other to save themselves. Entire families vanished overnight. Fear wasn't mobilized to unify people under a cause, but to destroy any sense of community. Stalin didn't just enlist his population, he fractured them. By pitting citizens against each other without any sense of ideology, just raw fear, Stalin bred a deeper psychological trauma, paranoia as a way of life.
Hitler's crimes were not only vast in scale, but intensely focused. The Holocaust was a targeted campaign, an operation of genocide rooted in racial science, ideology, and bureaucratic precision. It wasn't simply brutal, it was dehumanizing by design. Victims were catalogued, numbered, stripped of identity, experimented on, and destroyed. This wasn't incidental. It was deeply symbolic, an attempt to erase entire peoples. That level of targeted, symbolic violence has no parallel. Stalin's terror, while immense, lacked this single-mindedness. The clarity and fanaticism behind Hitler's actions reflect a unique evil intent on rewriting the hierarchy of humanity itself.
But the randomness of Stalin's cruelty may be even more terrifying. Under Hitler, targets were horrifyingly predictable. Under Stalin, anyone could fall. Loyalty didn't protect you. Achievements often made you more vulnerable. His purges swallowed war heroes, doctors, scientists, even loyal communists. Families were uprooted for no reason. Villages liquidated without warning. That total unpredictability broke the human psyche. Stalin destroyed the very idea of justice. And while Hitler's evil was focused, Stalin's was systemic, embedded into every level of society, invisible but omnipresent. It's evil without ideology, violence as governance.
Another critical dimension of Hitler's evil was how it mobilized advanced society toward barbarism. Germany in the 1930s was a highly educated, technologically advanced nation, yet Hitler turned its scientific elite into tools of genocide. Engineers designed gas chambers, doctors oversaw eugenics programs and human experimentation. Universities taught racial pseudoscience as fact. Hitler didn't just commit atrocities, he repurposed civilization to do so. That's uniquely dangerous. Using the very mechanisms of progress for annihilation, he showed the world how modernity could be corrupted into a machine for evil, blurring the line between civilization and savagery.
But Stalin weaponized progress in chillingly similar ways. He turned science and technology into instruments of repression. The Soviet Union's massive industrialization was achieved at the cost of millions of lives. Engineers, scientists, and intellectuals were constantly under suspicion. some executed, others sent to gulags for arbitrary offenses. Stalin used progress not to uplift society, but to enslave it. Technological advancement became a tool for central control. Even the achievements of the space race were built on the backs of those who lived in fear. Stalin demonstrated how progress without freedom becomes another kind of oppression, subtle, systemic, and impossible to escape.
Let's not overlook the war crimes committed under Hitler's command. Beyond genocide, the Nazi regime violated every convention of warfare. Summary executions of civilians, mass rape, scorched earth tactics, and forced labor across occupied Europe. Cities like Warsaw and Leningrad faced deliberate starvation campaigns. Entire villages were annihilated for resistance. Hitler's military wasn't just conquering, it was exterminating. And crucially, many of these acts were not rogue behavior, but official policy. The Wehrmacht and SS collaborated on atrocities with top-down approval. Hitler's vision of war was apocalyptic, a divine cleansing of the world through destruction. That scale of total war adds another layer to his moral depravity.
And yet Stalin committed war crimes of his own, many hidden or denied for decades. The Katyn massacre, where thousands of Polish officers were executed, was deliberately concealed. Soviet troops committed widespread atrocities as they advanced through Eastern Europe, looting, rape, and executions. Prisoners of war, including Soviet soldiers who had surrendered to Germany, were labeled traitors and often killed or imprisoned upon return. Stalin's military strategy involved human wave attacks, treating soldiers as expendable resources. His disregard for human life, even in victory, is staggering. The Soviet triumph didn't erase the moral cost. It deepened it, as Stalin proved that even defeating evil doesn't absolve you from embodying it.
The psychological aftermath of Hitler's rule also deserves attention. The trauma inflicted on Holocaust survivors, displaced populations, and entire ethnic groups was intergenerational. Many lived with permanent loss of family, homeland, and identity. Post-war Europe had to grapple not just with rebuilding, but with existential horror. How could civilization allow this? Hitler didn't just destroy lives, he shattered meaning itself. The crimes committed under his regime forced humanity to redefine ethics, justice, and memory. The sheer depth of moral collapse under Hitler's vision created a scar on collective consciousness that may never fully heal.
Stalin's psychological damage was just as pervasive, if less recognized. Millions of Soviet citizens grew up in a climate of fear, silence, and censorship. Trauma was inherited through stories untold, through neighbors who disappeared, through the normalization of state cruelty. Unlike Germany, which was forced to confront its past, Russia buried much of it. Generations were raised in denial, shaped by propaganda, afraid to speak. That lingering legacy of silence, repression, and unprocessed trauma has hindered healing and allowed parts of Stalin's worldview to survive. Evil that doesn't end, but morphs and hides in memory, can be even more dangerous.
In conclusion, Hitler's evil was monstrous not only in scale, but in method. He engineered genocide with purpose, waged war with apocalyptic intent, and corrupted an entire society's conscience. He weaponized ideology, science, education, and even childhood to build a culture of death. The fact that his crimes remain a benchmark of moral depravity is telling. Hitler didn't just destroy people, he destroyed values. He turned one of the world's most advanced nations into an engine of hate. That transformation, so total, so intentional, marks a unique form of evil that still haunts the world today.
Stalin's evil, though different in nature, was just as devastating. It was not born from ideology alone, but from absolute power, unchecked by morality. His terror didn't target one race. It consumed all. Stalin's legacy is one of betrayal, fear, and mass death through policy, famine, purges, and systemic oppression. He ruled longer, killed more, and left scars deeper within his own people. While Hitler's evil was explosive, Stalin's was corrosive, slow, sustained, and deeply embedded. The debate will never have a perfect answer, but Stalin's reign shows how evil can be less visible, more institutional, and just as destructive.
So the debate has ended and both sides scored incredibly high. However, we can see that Stalin's side won by a significant amount. Please remember that these scores all depend on the initial prompt and evaluation criteria, and it's for educational purposes only. The goal was to see how two advanced language models debate with each other and how they are able to counter-argue. I hope us humans can learn something from this discussion. Make sure to subscribe so you can see the next one.